morning, boys. I'm here to talk to you about General Douglas MacArthur, who is a very famous war general, as you can see on these pictures here. We're going to find out a little bit about his background, remind ourselves for the most part about his background, and write a judgment about his involvement in the Korean War specifically. So what I'd like you to do to start off with is take your pen and your paper, or if you're working on Microsoft Word, that's absolutely fine. Can you make sure that you've got that all set up and ready to go? As a starter, underneath your title, which is at the top of the screen, can you please write down what you know already about General Douglas MacArthur? Use these images here to help you write those recap notes. I'm looking for maybe 5 to 10 bullet points, just as a reminder of what you remember about him, maybe his personality, what wars he's been involved in, what happened to him at the end of his career. So pause this video now, spend a couple of minutes writing down 5 to 10 bullet points. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to find a little bit more background information about who he was and what happened to him across our period that we're studying. Now I've got a link here to history.com, which is a biography webpage, where you'll find there's a really detailed biography on Douglas MacArthur. I'd like you to read through that and copy and complete this table. So you'll see that I've done the first 2 lines for you. Obviously we're looking at General Douglas MacArthur. We know that he was alive from 1880 to 1964. I want you to find what his job was, what his personality was like. You need to make a description for this one. Then there was something really important that happened in 1932 with Herbert Hoover and the bonus army. Remember, there was tear gas that was used on these soldiers in the bonus army who were coming to ask for their World War I bonus early because of the Depression. Remember that 2 babies died because of the tear gas, and lots of those soldiers were injured. I want you to see if you can find out what General Douglas MacArthur's role was in that crisis, and think also about his reputation and the reputation of Hoover that happened as a result of that. Then you've got role in World War II. You'll find a lot of information about that one, so just summarize it. Role in the Korean War, and that's obviously where we're focusing on here, so I'm looking for a bit more detail for that one. And then finally, the end of his career, what happened on April the 11th? What did Truman decide? Here's a clue for you. And why did he decide that? So pause this video here, open up your biography on history.com in a new tab, copy and complete this table. You can either do it on Microsoft Word or draw it out by hand. If you want to do little notes rather than in a table, that's absolutely fine. It's completely up to you. And we are going to then go on to looking at what made him a war hero. Now, I've included here on your screen a picture of the front page of Brad Pitt's Fury, which was published, which was then made live as a movie in 2014. It's a story of this American hero who uses a tank to destroy the Nazis, and he's put across as this really, really heroic, confident person who really saves the day. And I think he and many other war heroes in American movies have been based upon a similar character to MacArthur. So MacArthur looks quite similar in his chiseled way to Brad Pitt in that photo, which is why I've included that for you. I want you to think about how somebody in a modern movie might be modelled on MacArthur himself. Why his personality and character is a good way, a good main character in a movie. So you'll find this video. Now I want you to watch it through a very careful history lens, because it is very, very one-sided. In history all the time, we've got to think about interpretations and why people think certain things and what their view is. Well, look at this as a way to find out why people think he's a hero, but also think about what language they've used and have they given a balance, and what have they used to prove why they think he's a hero. So, watch it critically. So pause this video now, and in your notes I want you to write down what this video tells us about why MacArthur is seen as a hero. Now I want to talk to you a little tiny bit about the structure of the US Army, so you know how important MacArthur was. Now you can see this whole table is the breakdown of all the different ranks and how the groups of soldiers are organized. So this is how the Americans use their army and how they organize it. The British Army uses a slightly different language, but it's essentially the same thing. Okay, so in American Army, right at the bottom, we have a squad. That's 6 to 10 soldiers, and you have a sergeant. You can see the 3 stripes on his in that box on the right hand side. That is what you see on his shoulder. We then go further up, we've got platoons. Those are people who tend to move around when we're looking at Vietnam. Those people who tend to move around together. So let's say roughly 40 soldiers in that one. And then we keep going up. Now, the first one I want to point out to you, I'm going to roll my cursor over it here, is a brigadier general. This is the first level of general. It's a 1-star general. Okay, so MacArthur started at the bottom. He worked his whole way up to a brigadier general. Okay, 1-star general. He then worked up 3 more stages from a 2-star major general to a 3-star lieutenant general, and then finally he led the US forces and the UN forces in the Korean War as a general. Okay, that means he's the top. He's in charge of the entire army. Okay, he has 50,000 soldiers under his command. So he is the most powerful person in the US Army, and nobody is more powerful than him in the army. However, what we've got to remember is that the army is always answerable to the president. So whatever the president says, the army does. They cannot question it. It wouldn't work for an army to work against the president, because then you just have a country in disarray. You need to have one person following the guidance of the other. So even though MacArthur is the most powerful person in the army, he still cannot make decisions himself. He does have to follow what the president says. So we know that MacArthur joined the army as a soldier in 1903 and retired in 1951. We know that he was fired by Truman, and we know that no other general in the entire history of US military has ever been publicly fired in such a way. So this is really, really significant. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to eventually copy and complete this sentence down here, and then write down your 3 reasons why Truman and MacArthur disagreed, and therefore why MacArthur was fired by Truman. You'll find lots and lots of evidence in this paragraph here that I'm just going to go through with you to help you and support you in answering that question. So in your biography, which you wrote right at the start of this lesson, you will have found out about his personality. We know that MacArthur had a bullying, no-nonsense style, which did enable him to get things done, but it was really annoying to his leaders. Okay, he had, as we know, to follow the instructions of the president. So when the president in Washington heard that he was planning to do something he didn't agree with, well, that's when Truman decided to fire him. Okay, so he did not listen to his leaders. I've mentioned it's the role of the army to do exactly what the government orders them to do. So when MacArthur began to ignore the UN instruction, which was don't attack China in 1951, when he ignored that instruction and then threatened to attack China, potentially with nuclear weapons, Truman felt he had no choice, fired him publicly from his post as general. And remember, the general is the person who's most powerful, so therefore it is a really, really big deal. Okay. What's also useful to note is that the 2 sides had already reached a stalemate in January. Okay, we're talking about April when MacArthur was fired. So already in that year, the 2 sides had basically already finished fighting. They'd reached that stalemate. No one was making any further advances. So the war is essentially over already, and MacArthur is still trying to invade China or drop nuclear bombs on China. So that's another reason why they disagreed. Well, another important point here is Truman. Remember, he took over from Roosevelt when he died, and Truman made the decision to drop the 2 nuclear bombs on Japan. So he had already seen the huge destruction that this caused, and was already seeing 5 years afterwards the cancers and the diseases and things that nuclear weapons had brought in since the bombs had dropped. So he's going to be really, really unlikely to want to use those again. So that's another reason why they disagree. A final reason why Truman and MacArthur disagree is Truman's objective. Remember, we talked a lot about containment. Now, what Truman wanted to do is he wanted to stop communism from spreading, to contain it in a particular area. So if he then goes and attacks China, that is not containing communism, it's attacking a communist country. So that's another reason why Truman and MacArthur disagree, because Truman is containing communism, whereas MacArthur seems to want to openly attack communist countries. So what I'd like you to do now is pause this video and copy this sentence down, and then the next sentence, and write down 3 main reasons why Truman and MacArthur disagreed. Okay, remember that disagreeing was the reason why, or what led to MacArthur's sacking. So pause this video now, copy and complete those 2 sentences. And when you come back to me, we're going to do one final thing. This is a 4-mark question, so it's going to take you maybe 5 minutes to plan, because we're going to talk through that together, and then 5 minutes to write yourself. So you will always get a source question in your Korea and Vietnam paper. All right, the source will always be the first thing you come across. So you need to just basically write down what you see, okay, with a bit of knowledge alongside. So I've said here 2 points, 1 point for every 2 marks. Use a description from the source and use your own knowledge. So here is in purple, I've got you a sentence starter that should give you as much as you need, as well as a little bit of my knowledge, which I've left for you to complete where the ... are to help you answer that. So we know this source is critical. It essentially is telling us the US are doing a bad job, as it describes American imperialist violence, which reached a peak when MacArthur, and obviously we know that MacArthur hinted that he wanted to drop nuclear bombs on China. So we can complete that sentence very easily, and that'll be your 2 marks done. Now for your second 2 marks, I've given you 4 options for what you could mention. Okay, let's look at the red one I've mentioned first of all. So here in the right-hand side, you can see Uncle Sam. Okay, you can see his hat with the stars and the stripes representing America. Uncle Sam is, just your bog standard, your Joe Blogs, your normal American person. Okay, he's hanging from a noose. So what does that suggest about the victorious people over here? What they've done to America, okay? What they've been able to do to American violence in Korea. Essentially, these guys are victorious. They've suggested they've won. He is hanging from a noose. His life is no longer. So we could say that that's critical of US tactics, because they essentially haven't worked. In the blue here, red destruction in the background. Now here, you can see just behind this man shaking his fist, there's some red destruction. Now this could be either, burning fires that the American violence have caused in Korea, and therefore could be a criticism of US tactics, or it could be the rise of communism. So we know that communism, the colour of communism is red, and it could be that US tactics have failed to stop the rise of the communist countries in Asia, and therefore the rise of communism is coming there. What happened in 1951? Well, this Chinese propaganda poster was published in 1951, which was the end of the war. They'd reached a stalemate, so the war hadn't worked. We know that MacArthur was just about to get fired, so he was ready to want to drop his bombs. So you can mention these down here, suggesting that US tactics were failing. Finally, what does it imply about whether the Americans should be involved in Korea? This is a slightly harder question. Remember, the Americans have got involved to contain communism. Many communist countries also didn't really want them there, because they wanted their countries to be communist. So China, as a recently communist country from 1949, are saying Korea's 3,000-mile country must be unified. They're also saying that America is an imperialist and is being violent with that imperialism and wants them out of South Korea. Now, an imperialist, the root of that word, we're looking at the word empire really here. So America is dominating other countries, and is using violence to dominate them. This is what China is saying here. So the Americans, this source is implying that the Americans should not be involved in Korea. They're using their violent imperialist approach to dominate the country and stop it from being unified. So what I'd like you to do now is, this video is going to end very, very shortly. You can pause it here so you can use the notes on the screen and use the source as well. Answer this question in full sentences in your notes, and submit all those notes in the usual way via Show My Homework, or if there's some reason why that's not working, send it directly to your class teacher. Please do comment if you have any questions on Show My Homework, and I will answer those as soon as I can, or send me an email if you've had any problems. Good luck, and I'll hopefully see you in school at some point soon.